7 Republicans hoping to catch up to Donald Trump, all in the GOP presidential race. They sparred last night in the second primary debate. Here are a few of the highlights.
Congress has only delivered a budget on time 4 times in 40 years. Right. If they don't keep the government open, they should not get paid. No pay, no budget. That's the way we should go.
You're not here tonight because you're afraid of being on the stage and defending your record. You're ducking these things. And let me tell you what's going to happen. You keep doing that, no one up here is going to call you Donald Trump anymore. We're going to call you Donald Duck.
His last debate, he said we were all bought and paid for. And I thought about that for a little while and said, you know, I can't imagine how you could say that knowing that you were just in business with the Chinese Communist Party and the same people that funded Hunter Biden millions of dollars was a partner of yours as well. It's not nonsense.
So look, here's what I want to respond. These are good people who are tainted by a broken system, and it's not the fault of anybody who's involved.
That was the tone of much of the debate last night, with candidates talking over each other. Meantime, former President Trump, he was in Michigan speaking to auto workers at a non-union plant. He blasted President Biden for his push into electric cars in the midst of the auto workers' strike. He also took a shot at the other GOP presidential hopefuls, calling them job candidates looking for a secretary position. Joining us now to talk about all of this, Mariana Alfaro is a political reporter with the Washington Post. Good morning to you. Your take on what we saw last night. Who was the winner? Who was the loser? We were doing our own little poll over here.
I don't think there were many winners last night, actually. And I think, if anything, the biggest losers might have been, well, first the moderators who lost control of that real quick. But I think most of them on stage, they spent 2 hours kind of amounting to no big moments and nothing really to take home and make ads with. Definitely a very chaotic debate, but nothing super strong on policy. It kind of came down to a lot of personal attacks. There's definitely more attacks on Trump. But nothing much more than the first debate, I'd say.
You know, last debate, I don't know if he was the winner of it, but clearly got the most attention was Vivek Ramaswamy. A lot of folks, though, looking now at Nikki Haley as perhaps the winner of this debate or maybe the last debate. How did you see those two candidates in all this?
Well, last debate, they kind of bickered a lot between the two of them. We saw way more of that today. But I do agree that Haley has a really good control of the debate stage compared to, I mean, all the other men on it. She definitely, came forward with a lot of receipts, if you want to call them like that, whenever she was being accused of something by other candidates. There was a specific moment where she and Tim Scott kind of went head to head over some, things she did as ambassador. She actually was like, no, that wasn't me. That was the Obama administration. And also as governor in South Carolina, they would know they're both there. But I would say that she had the ability to kind of turn the situation to her and like make these really good pointed, clapbacks. But I would say that other than that, it was kind of, same energy as the first time from her too.
Mariana, I guess it's the nature of the beast maybe, but Mark Penn, the Democrat, former Clinton strategist, said that Joe Biden, they barely got any mention. The Bidenomics, barely any mention. Inflation, barely any, no economic policy. Just either attacking each other and bickering or attacking Donald Trump. I guess that's what you have to do, but doesn't really move the ball down the field for Republicans.
Yeah, and I think they kind of started a debate saying, this time around we're not going to attack each other. We're going to go after Joe Biden. And then, as I mentioned, very few mentions of Biden and his economic agenda. There was a bit of talk over, him being on the picket line and saying, like, no, he shouldn't be at the picket line. He should be on the, unemployment line or stuff like that, or saying that he should be focusing on the border again. But a lot of deflection and not a lot of, a meat on the policy side. There weren't a lot of things that they were saying, this is what we would be doing different from Biden or the other Republicans on stage. And I think, again, whenever all these things happen, it's always important to remember that the front runners in this race so far are Biden and former President Trump. So for them to not take the opportunity to go stronger after both of them, I think it was a missed chance.
Do you think that something can happen in any of the early primary states. When we've asked some of the candidates running against President Trump, former President Trump, that very question, they've said, look, things can change in Iowa, New Hampshire, other places. You think that's the case? What's the cutoff date for when you would really have the chance to make a move?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely those early primary stages. But even then, if you look at the polling right now, and I think we made this point in the Post yesterday, is if you put all of those candidates together and made them one person, they would still be losing to Trump by 20 points in the current polls. Again, as Ron DeSantis said yesterday, the polls don't win elections, it's the people who go and vote. But it's they're pretty running behind right now. And I would say that maybe we'll see a lot of these folks still on the debate stage next time, but it's starting to become obvious that if they want to get through the primaries and kind of mount the challenge, it needs to start happening now.
Marianne, do you believe the polls? Because I've had conversations with people recently who say polls are getting worse and worse and worse because the way the polls actually reach out to people, it's a self-defining group of people who will answer your phone call or respond to some of these polls to begin with. So maybe the polls aren't what they used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago.
I do agree with that. But we had a situation at the Post this week where we, had this very clearly outlier poll. And so we made a point of noting it in the story saying, this kind of doesn't match with what we're seeing in other polls. The advantage that Trump has or is showing in this poll is very much larger than in other polls. So there is something to be said about whether we should be changing methods. I don't know how much we learned from 2016, but definitely the polls back then helped intensify this momentum that Trump had. So I think that it's worth looking at the systems too. I do agree with that.